"My heart is sick and sad," Chief Joseph declared. His war shirt adorned with sacred beads, staff clenched in his left hand atop a sturdy Appaloosa. In 1877, his 800 Nez Perce people fled 1,000 miles, pursued by U.S. troops after losing 90% of their homeland to a deceitful 1863 treaty. General Sherman admitted their courage elicited universal praise. With just 250 warriors, they outmaneuvered a modern army, yet fell 40 miles from Canada's refuge. Why did a loyal ally face such betrayal? Watch to unravel their defiant saga. The Nez Perce, known as the Namipu, lived across the rivers, mountains, and prairies of the Pacific Northwest. Their homeland stretching over 17 million acres in what is now Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. They built teepees from reed mats and bison hides, and their lodges housed families who relied on salmon, elk, and wild roots for sustenance. Women wove intricate basket hats and wore colorful dresses adorned with beads, while men donned sacred war shirts, believed to carry spiritual protection. Their Wayakin, or spiritual guardians, guided their lives, shaping a culture rooted in harmony with the land. By 1877, some 4,000 Nez Perce maintained this way of life, blending tradition with selective adoption of Christianity, while others followed the Dreamer faith, which promised divine restoration through indigenous practices. In 1855, a treaty with the United States secured legal rights to nearly all their ancestral territory, covering roughly 7.5 million acres. This agreement promised peace and protection for the Nez Perce, who had aided American explorers like Lewis and Clark in 1805, providing food and shelter during their expedition. The treaty was a cornerstone of trust, with the Nez Perce seen as steadfast allies. However, the U.S. government's commitment proved fragile, as economic interests soon overshadowed diplomatic promises, setting the stage for conflict. The discovery of gold in 1860 unleashed a flood of Euro-American prospectors, with over 10,000 miners and settlers pouring into Nez Perce lands by 1862. They carved out dusty boomtowns and staked claims for farms and ranches, blatantly violating the 1855 treaty. These intrusions disrupted sacred hunting grounds and fishing sites, with settlers felling forests and diverting streams. The Nez Perce, numbering around 4,000, faced mounting pressure as their territory shrank under the weight of this unchecked migration, which historian Alvin Josephy described as a ruthless invasion driven by greed. In 1863, U.S. officials redrew the boundaries, convincing a few conciliatory Nez Perce leaders to sign a new treaty that slashed their land to just 760,000 acres, a staggering loss of 90% of their territory. Chief Joseph, leader of the Wallowa Valley Band, condemned this as theft, likening it to a neighbor selling your horses without permission. His band, one of many semi-autonomous groups, refused to recognize the treaty, as no single leader could bind all Nez Perce. The agreement's illegitimacy was clear, yet the U.S. pressed forward, prioritizing gold mines and settlements over justice. The Nez Perce operated as semi-autonomous bands, each led by chiefs like Joseph, Lookingglass, or Whitebird, with no central authority to dictate for all. In 1873, U.S. commissioners admitted the 1863 treaty lacked binding power over Joseph's band, as it violated Nez Perce customs of consensus. Despite this acknowledgement, the government ignored its own findings, pushing Joseph and others toward a reservation barely a tenth of their original homeland. This betrayal, as historian Kent Nerburn notes, exposed the U.S. as prioritizing expediency over honor, eroding trust built over decades. Settlers' crimes against the Nez Perce went largely unpunished, fueling deep resentment. By 1877, reports documented over 50 incidents of cattle and horse theft, alongside murders and assaults on Nez Perce women, with only a handful of perpetrators prosecuted. Young warriors, witnessing their people's suffering, grew increasingly volatile. Their anger, as historian Elliot West observes, was a natural response to years of systemic injustice, as the American legal system turned a blind eye to settler violence, leaving the Nez Perce with little recourse. In June 1877, 3 young Nez Perce men, enraged by the murder of a relative, attacked settler homes, killing 4 men. The next night, joined by 16 warriors, they struck again, killing around 15 settlers, including women and children, in a brutal act of vengeance. These raids, though limited to a small group, ignited a broader conflict. The violence shocked local communities, but as historian D. Brown argues, it was a spark born of desperation, not unprovoked aggression, rooted in years of unaddressed grievances. Chief Joseph, away from camp during the raids, returned to condemn the attacks. Clad in a beaded war shirt, he stood before his people, urging restraint among the 200 young men of his band. He later reflected that controlling their tempers was a constant struggle, as the weight of injustice pressed heavily. His leadership balanced diplomacy with the growing unrest, a tension historian Bruce Hampton calls a tragic bind between peace and the demand for justice, as Joseph sought to avoid war while protecting his people's rights. General Oliver Otis Howard sent over 100 soldiers to pursue the Nez Perce, who had moved camp to a canyon in Idaho. As a Nez Perce group approached under a white flag, a volunteer fired, triggering a fierce response. 60 Nez Perce sharpshooters, mounted on swift Appaloosa horses, targeted officers and trumpeters, killing 34 Americans without losing a single warrior. Their precision, honed by scarce ammunition and tactical signals, showcased their prowess, which historian Robert Utley praised as a display of martial skill unmatched in the frontier wars. Howard, fearing further resistance, ordered the arrest of neutral Chief Lookingglass and his village. In July 1877, U.S. cavalry attacked, plundering homes and stealing 600 horses, vital to the Nez Perce's mobility. This assault, as historian Merrill Beal notes, shattered any illusion of neutrality, forcing Lookingglass and his 150 followers to join Joseph. The attack unified the Nez Perce, swelling their ranks but deepening their resolve to resist forced relocation. A caravan of 800 Nez Perce, including 250 fighting men, fled with 2,000 horses through the Bitterroot Range, a rugged 200-mile stretch of the Rockies. They carried teepees, food, and weapons, navigating treacherous passes while securing safe passage from local troops. Seeking allies, they aimed for the Crow, with whom some had fought alongside against the Sioux. Their journey, as historian Jerome Green describes, was a testament to their endurance and strategic acumen, covering terrain that tested even seasoned explorers. On the 9th of August, 1877, U.S. forces crept toward a Nez Perce camp along the Big Hole River, hearing dogs bark and babies cry. At dawn, they fired into teepees, aiming low to kill sleeping families, resulting in 60 to 90 deaths, mostly women and children. Nez Perce warriors, rallying swiftly, drove the attackers into the woods, killing 29 soldiers. The massacre, as historian Alvin Josephy writes, exposed the U.S. Army's willingness to target civilians, leaving a scar that fueled the Nez Perce's desperate flight. In Yellowstone, recently established as a national park in 1872, the Nez Perce hid among its 3,400 square miles of forests and geysers. They took 25 tourists captive to mask their movements, later releasing them with food and directions. However, a few warriors, enraged by Big Hole, attacked other tourists, killing 2, an act Joseph condemned. This split, as historian Kent Nerburn notes, revealed the strain of war on a people pushed beyond endurance, balancing survival with moral restraint. On the 30th of September, 1877, Colonel Nelson Miles led 600 soldiers and Cheyenne scouts to storm the Nez Perce camp at Bear Paw, 40 miles from Canada. They captured 1,500 horses, crippling mobility, and killed key leaders, including Tahuluzo and Lookingglass, shot while scanning for allies. After days of artillery fire and snow, the Nez Perce lost 25 warriors, with Miles's forces losing 24. The siege, as historian Elliot West states, marked the end of a heroic resistance against overwhelming odds. On the 5th of October, Chief Joseph, rifle across his lap, rode out with 5 warriors to meet Miles and Howard. His surrender speech, recorded by a U.S. War DAT officer, declared, "I will fight no more forever," as he prioritized saving 400 surviving Nez Perce, including the wounded and children, refusing to abandon them. His decision, as historian D. Brown writes, reflected a leader's sacrifice for his people's survival, cementing his legacy as a symbol of resilience and humanity. Chief Joseph's surrender at Bear Paw in 1877 marked the end of a 1,000-mile odyssey, but not the spirit of the Nez Perce. Despite losing 150 lives in battle and another 150 to disease and starvation in exile, their resilience endured. Sent to the harsh Indian Territory instead of their promised reservation, they faced unimaginable loss, including nearly all their young children. Yet, as historian Alvin Josephy notes, their survival against such odds was a testament to their unyielding will. The Nez Perce War exposed a brutal truth. A nation's greed for land and gold shattered a people's trust. General Sherman himself admitted their courage earned universal praise, while the New York Times in 1877 decried the war as an unpardonable crime. The Nez Perce, reduced to 400 survivors at Bear Paw, carried their culture forward, returning to the Northwest in 1885, though fragmented on reservations. Their story stirs deep empathy for a people who fought not for conquest but for their homeland. Chief Joseph's plea to save his children echoes through time, a reminder of their humanity. How can we, in 2025, honor the Nez Perce's legacy by addressing the ongoing dispossession of native lands when 90% of their territory was stolen in a single treaty?